Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chairman of the board of LexMedia. I want to welcome you to another segment of Coffee with the Candidates. This year has been an important election year with so many candidates running for so many offices. It's always good to see people running for office because that means people are engaged in the community, they're thinking about issues. We've got good incumbents running, and we've got great challenges considering run for public office as well. Lexington is certainly a great community, and we're fortunate to have so many civic-minded people. Towards that end, I'm pleased and proud to introduce a friend of mine, Dawn McKenna. Dawn is, I asked her if she was a lifelong Lexington resident, and she said almost. She said she came here when she was 5 years old. But did attend all of the public schools here. She went to Franklin School, which is up off of, I think, Allen Street, right? Yeah. Yes. Where you met your husband, you said, in Franklin School, second grade. Yep. And you pledged to marry, and you did.
Well, not quite in second grade.
You weren't pledged.
But
they didn't pledge you, but
certainly in high school, we said we were going to get married.
Oh, you were going to get married in high school, but you knew way back when that there was that magical union together, right?
Yes.
All right. You were a graduate of class of '76, Lexington High School.
Correct. All around the bicentennial.
And Steve was too.
And my husband was too, yep.
Yep. So you were a junior when the bicentennial came to Lexington, so you were right in the middle of it, I'm sure.
Yes. I stood to wait for President Ford to come with some child on my shoulder who I, to this day, don't know who that person was.
Really?
So if you sat on somebody's shoulders by the Belfry, looking at the Minuteman statue, get in touch with me.
Well. In terms of some of your community participation and civic participation, you've just received a 30-year pin for town meeting. Thank you for your service. And you're a former member of the Board of Selectmen. So this is kind of like another run. So it must be important. It's not the kind of thing that you obviously do lightly. You've thought about it, and you decided it was important for you to take another run at this because you've got a lot of things to say and important issues that you want to sort of bring to the forefront. You served there for a term, and then after leaving the board, of course, I'm telling you this like you don't know it. This is for everybody at home, right? But you served. You were the liaison, select person liaison, to the tourism committee, and then once you left the board, you kind of assumed the chairmanship of the tourism committee, where you just did extraordinary things. I tell people. That, for instance, you helped really shape tourism into the industry it is in the eyes of Lexington.
Yes. It
was always there, but nobody ever really quantified the results of what was happening with heads in beds. You brought encounters to the old visitor center so that we could get a handle on how many people are actually coming through Lexington at any given time.
And they're still in the new visitor center.
And
they got transferred because I got town meeting to pay for them.
Well, that's great. So and your diligence on that really, because it paid off, because Carl Valenti, who was the town manager at the time, I think he saw some credence to what you were talking about and decided to get on the bandwagon, and tourism really became something. And then, of course, through your efforts, I know you didn't do it alone, but you were the linchpin in the effort to bring us a new visitor center, which is interesting because when you think about the old visitor center, that was built in anticipation of the bicentennial.
Yes.
And now we have a beautiful new visitor center to greet some numbers are saying 250,000 people here the weekend of Patriots Day. But it's been in place now for a couple of years, and it's really it's a beautiful place. It's become a great place for people to meet and greet and to learn about Lexington as they sort of embark on their visit here. So my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the important things about the visitor center is that when I first started with tourism, everyone used to complain that people would come to Lexington, look at the Battle Green, and leave. Mm-hmm. So our opportunity was to, in fact, create a center that would encourage people to stay, let them learn about all the businesses here that they can support unknowingly, but simply, about how we should go there. and also to partner with our regional partners, which has become very important. And you just mentioned the possibility of 250,000 in Lexington for the 250th. But what we do know is at the bicentennial, there were 1 million people that visited the national park. And what was really interesting about that is that people did not think that it was going to last. They were planning for a few years.
Right.
But what was found is that it became sustainable. And so whatever the visitorship specifically to Lexington is over that weekend, that will be sustained for years to come. And that will be another boon for the tourism industry.
It's so important, and it helps drive the economy here in Lexington. And I dare say that, you know, that like you say, 1 million people at the national park, the sustained visitorship is what helped drive the decision for the national park to start acquiring land and expand. Because they did that not long. They started doing that not long after the bicentennial, I imagine.
Yeah, I can't remember whether it was before the bicentennial to attract people, or it was after that, but it was certainly in that range, because I remember as a child being a Girl Scout, riding to an ice cream place that was along that route. Buttricks, yes. Yes, it was the first time I got to buy my own ice cream, the size that I wanted, and I still remember it.
And the Willow Pond Kitchen.
And the Willow Pond Kitchen,
And
exactly.
I went to the Willow Pond Kitchen after the bicentennial, so I know that was still there after the bicentennial.
So it probably was after.
And I remember because they used to serve frog legs there, and I thought that was just absolutely disgusting, and I know that was burned into my memory. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about some important things that are coming up in front of the town. Recently at town meeting, it was last year, 2023, I keep forgetting.
2023, yeah.
23, they changed the bylaws in Lexington, the zoning in Lexington, and accepted Lexington was the first to officially accept the MBTA zoning as a concept. And not only did they accept it, but they accepted it in a big way. They said, we're not going to just do 50 acres, we're going to do 217 acres? 228 acres. And it's become a bit of it was a good concept that's now almost, it seems unmanageable. A lot of people have some concerns about it. They're trying to work with it to sort of rein it in a little bit. But to some degree, I was talking with another candidate earlier. For some of it, it's almost too late because they've already applied for like over 1,100 units that have already been accepted, and there's really nothing we can do about that. But we can work with it going forward. So let me talk to you a little bit about, or let me ask you about the MBTA zoning, what it meant to you. Like back in 2023, where did you stand on it there? How did you see it, and where do you see it today? Sure.
Well, in 2023, I was one of the few people who really understood what was going to happen with this projected. I have a background in real estate. I used to own the largest real estate company in Lexington. And so I knew what happens when Lexington produces housing. It doesn't matter what kind of housing they produce. I want to say from the outset that I am committed to meeting or exceeding the goals of the MBTA Communities Act. What I'm concerned about is that what Lexington stepped into is far beyond that. But in terms of 2023, so in 2023, I called a group of town meeting members, basically invited anybody who wanted to participate to say what they are proposing I'm very concerned about. And I'd like to hear if there was some agreement that having something that extensive would be worth taking a look at before we get started with it. And we were able to pull together a coalition of people with varying opinions, from they don't want any any new housing, multifamily housing, to we want every bit we can possibly get, and everything in between. And over a couple of weeks, we worked together, and I led the process to come up with what they call the McKenna amendments, which people can look up online. Which would have significantly pulled back, wouldn't have pulled back as much as we wanted, but in fact it was a compromise.
Right.
And so we felt very proud of what we had done. That vote failed by 6 votes. And one of the things that's important for voters to think about this year is to go back and look at who voted in that election, especially if they're concerned about the MBTA zoning. Because of the 6, 5 of them were members of the select board, including Mr. Pato, who's running for re-election this year. He was one of the leaders in advocating for the most affordable most housing.
Can I
that we
ask you
could get.
about Doug, though? Doug
Well, so Doug voted for my amendment.
Right.
And then once my amendment failed, then he voted for.
Right.
But Doug was the only one who voted against voted for my amendment.
Right.
Ultimately, had even one member of the board supported in particular, Joe, who was leading the charge on that side, had supported it at that time, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in today. And it's a serious mess. We have taken a gamble that is not paying off, and it's
Right.
going to cost us at every level. And so fast forward from there, where we were landed, and that's what you've got today. And I think the important thing for people to understand is not only was it 4.5 times the acreage, the more important number to me is the number of housing units.
Right.
So there are approximately 12,500 housing units in Lexington today, certified by the state based on the law that we passed. There are double the number of that, 10 times what we were required to do, which was 1,200. And we are already today, within 9 months of the first time you could apply for this zoning, we already are just about at 10%, and we've now had some recent zoning freezes, which will allow for another 4,000 units. So we're already on the hook for up to 5,000 units. Definitely the 1,100 that have been put forward, but about 5,000. If we don't do something to stop this and do it now, then that's a serious problem. So fast forward to that, I had been asked by various people in time for the 2024 annual town meeting to consider, bringing something back forward. I said, it's too soon. People don't understand what's going to happen. They need to see it.
Right.
And so then this fall, Carol Sarsadote, who's the citizen petitioner, came to me and asked me if I would, take this challenge on and work with her, because zoning is complicated, and there's a reason over the years that I haven't spent too much of my focus on zoning, because you really do need to have an expertise around zoning to be able to do it.
Right.
But in this case, the planning board wasn't doing it, the select board wasn't doing it, and we knew that if we didn't do something, then we would really go over that cliff really fast. And so we worked together. Again, I pulled together that same coalition around the McKenna group and said, what kind of interest is there in this? And I'm explaining this because this is what I do with everything that comes along. I learned through the debate team, which I was one of the people that founded back at Lexington High School, that you need to talk to people that you agree with and people you disagree with, because you learn more from those you disagree with. But so to fast forward through a number of people who have stepped forward to help and support, we were able to get a special article for a special town meeting. And that's what Article 2 is, that people have already gotten their warrant for.
Right.
And at the same time, just to give us options, we also put in a new article onto the annual town meeting 2025. So hopefully we'll resolve it on March the 17th.
Tell me a little bit about Article 2. What does it propose to do?
So what it proposes to do is remove 2 of the districts that were approved in whole. And then every other district is either left intact or has a small portion that's in there, because unfortunately, going back to the financial cliff that I've talked about, is that you cannot stop the ones that have already come through. So there are now 12 projects that are
all by right.
I'm sorry, 9 projects that are all by right. We can't do anything about it. The neighbors, as they would normally do, come to the planning board and say, fix this for me, fix that.
Right.
They can't. They have
Zero
no choice.
mitigation, I understand
The
too.
zero
They're
mi-
not bringing any dollars to the table for associated infrastructure costs, public safety, anything like that.
Well, so I'm going to say that there's zero required.
That's
we
my
can't.
point.
But a couple
yeah.
of them have brought forward some minor mitigation, but nothing compared to what it's going to
Right.
be. And yes, so we have to be concerned about the capital infrastructure, and so this would pull this back. We have currently proposed to about 77 acres. It would include, there's nothing we can do about the ones that have already been submitted, but it would essentially allow us to continue to exceed the MBTA zoning requirements, but it pulls back our individual town zoning, which I think the state, always anticipated that each town would make their own decisions. And one of the key places that we've taken out of it that there's, some concern about is the center. And I keep saying, Lexington Center was certified for 875 units. Can you imagine? And we're required to have one parking space for every housing unit.
Right.
So it's not only the units, it's the housing. We have so many better tools. We could create a separate district for Lexington Center, and nothing that's being proposed in this article will change that.
Right.
I think the other part of the article that's really important goes back to my community engagement issue. So we have had a resolution as part of it, which is non-binding, but just to say the will of the town meeting is that both the select board needs to do a process to engage with the community on things like the financial consequences of what we're doing. There are serious consequences that people need to understand. To need to engage people, not specifically around the zoning pieces, but just in general to find out what is it that they want. Do they think this is okay or not? Now, I can tell you, one of the things that I'm very proud about my engagement is I have engaged with the community as long as I've been a public servant.
Right.
And in particular, over this MBTA zoning piece, I have been knocking doors, and I'm now up to over 750 doors individually, and not to mention phone calls that I'm personally making. And they're not robocalls for people who, I got that call last night. Is this a robocall? I was like, no, it's me. But in any case, every time I knock on a door, the first question is, how do you feel about the MBTA zoning? And the second question is, how do you feel about the schools?
Right.
And so in terms of the MBTA zoning, I am, along with two other town meeting members and the citizen, steering the discussions and the motion, and very much am going to vote in favor of it. I say that unequivocally because other candidates have said
You're going to vote in favor of
Article 2, which will roll things back.
Right.
And other candidates have indicated that they will once they see the final motion. Well, the motion is up. It's not going to change very much. We may make a couple of tweaks, but it's basically up. So everybody can look at that on the special town meeting page of the town meeting website.
But getting hold of costs, and anticipating costs is huge. Like it's hard to quantify the effect that this will have on public safety. But I know that it'll have an increase in the cost of public safety, whether it's police or fire. It's obviously going to affect the number of students at school, because there is an equation. I talked to Patrick Mayer. If nothing else, Patrick is a numbers guy, so he talked about the numbers, and Patrick talks a lot about he did. I'll give him credit for having been able to identify years ago, and you may have as well, when they were building this facility, the effect that the residents, the student population would have on the school system. They were saying something like 60 students. Well, it was twice that.
Well, let me tell you that story, because I was actually chairman of the board when this when the town acquired this property.
Yeah.
And I am somebody who's not afraid to say what I think, whether I'm the only one in the room doing that, to make sure that all the issues are on the table. And in the case of this particular site, which is the Avalon, which was the former Met State property for people who remember that, the town wanted us to acquire this property and turn it into housing. And I knew because I attend school committee meetings as well as select board meetings and still do, that was going to have a serious effect on enrollment at a time when we were working on the 9 school projects to actually renew or replace every school because of its age. And so at the time, I sat at a table like this with the representatives from the state and some of my colleagues and said to them, we cannot absorb the number of students that are going to come into this, because from my real estate background, what I know is it doesn't matter what size unit you buy. If you are somebody with children, you want them in the Lexington public schools, the adult in the household may sleep on a couch in a 1-bedroom and let the kids have the unit. And it's not going to be 1 kid, it's going to be 2. So I insisted, and to your point, the number was 117 ultimately. They were saying that there was going to be around 100 students or something to that effect.
60 something.
Something like that. I said, well, then I want you to pay us for every one of those students. And they said, well, what if we're off? What if we raise the number? I said, pick whatever number you want. Because I know whatever number you give me, it's going to be significantly more than that.
Right.
So I got them to agree to give us a pot of money for the town of $700,000, which at the time represented 100 new students. And that once, for every student that came in, we could draw down from that fund. It would sit and earn interest, and it was supposed to last us for 10 years.
Right.
It lasted 3.
Right.
Because they grossly underestimated.
Right.
And so I had that background and understanding looking at this. We're in the same position
Right.
with the MBTA, only the bad thing is we can't negotiate with anybody.
Right.
We have to accept it,
Well,
and we have to absorb them.
Right. There's no mitigation that comes, like you say, it's not allowed through all of the, through the legislation or the policy that came out of the state. And, and by the way, there's no way to really determine that number yet. So we don't even know the number. We're flying blind because we just know it's going to cause an increase in the school population. We just don't know how, and then how do you project that in to the process? And we're going to segue into a discussion of the high school, because they're talking about the high school now, and I understand that that they're building a high school based on the number of students that we have now, and the proposed school doesn't even take into account the number of students that we already have. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
And so without even adding in the potential for increased numbers here, are we digging ourselves into a hole again? So I guess this is a good way to talk about how this MBTA impacts the schools, and where do you come down on the school. I understand it's more, it's not just, for some people it's bloom and not bloom, but there is much more to the issue than that.
Well, yes, and you've said a lot of things which I'll try to comment on, but ultimately, strong leadership is really important at this time, and that's why I'm running. I have a proven track record of getting things done, and the high school is one of them. I have been talking to Joe Pato, Kathleen Linehan, and Dr. Julie Hackett, the superintendent, for a year and a half, telling them that they are managing this project to fail. When you start with the premise that they are building a school for less population than we have today at $700 million or $650 or whatever figure you want to use, that's just not a good message. And we shouldn't be thinking like that. And part of the problem is everybody is so concerned what MSBA will or will not do for us. What I want to do is I want to be able to go to the voters and look them in the eyes and tell them that I have done the best that I can to make the right project at the most cost-effective way that we can for that project, so that it in fact lasts for 75 years, which is what they're telling us that they want. And the part that people don't understand is you cannot pass a debt exclusion just by having school parents vote for it.
Right.
You need everybody, and affordability is a concern for lots of people. Some school parents, others, that just want it done. But to hear Joe Pato say that we are building the fastest, cheapest school that we can do, I say to myself, That's not what we've ever done for any other building project that we've done in this town. We've always said, what do we need? What's the best thing that we can do? And then how do we fund it in a way that's the most affordable for people?
Right.
And that's not what's taken place here. And it's a serious concern. And to me, the engagement piece, again, is so important because I've attended many of those meetings over the last year and a half. And what I watch the school building committee, which is responsible for this, do and say is, you come to a meeting, they have an agenda. They read off their agenda. They then take a vote. And then they say, is there any public comment? Well, that doesn't exactly make people think that you're listening to them. And the thing that's so frustrating about that for me personally, and going back to experience and leadership and understanding the present and the past, is that, in fact, when I first got involved in politics, the school committee always had public comment, always engaged with people at every conversation. And the select board didn't have it. And I was the one who went to the chairman at that time and said, this is not right, that the public can't tell you what they want to talk about without it being on the agenda. So after a while, I got them to change that. So in this case, we're doing this important project, and this important project is not allowing people to talk and get frustrated. And that's not okay.
It's the biggest public works project in Lexington history. With I'm talking about the scope, not just the amount, but the scope of the project and all. People need to have a seat at the table. They need to be heard on this.
Well, and the one time that they did really good public engagement, the school building committee has had lots of meetings.
Right.
And again, going back, I was the one who used to say, you need to have public meetings so that at the end of the day, at a debt exclusion, people can say, oh, I had all these opportunities to go and I couldn't or didn't or whatever. So I'm going to trust what people have done.
And I'm proud to say, by the way, the LexMedia has been broadcasting all of those meetings. So we're not letting it go. So we want people in the room if they can't be in the room.
That's so kind of LexMedia because the public needs that opportunity. And anyway, so going back to this, so in particular, with the school building project, the one time that I thought they had an excellent engagement session, they did everything that we wanted them to do, was what came out of that as the number one issue was that people really valued the public education in Lexington, and they wanted to see from Mass Ave a presence of Lexington High School. Now, that doesn't mean you have to necessarily build the building right there, but you have to do something to let the people standing at the depot and looking at the high school know that it's there.
Right.
And what did they do with that? Absolutely nothing. Most people don't realize that the original high school was built to mimic, the front entrance was meant to mimic the depot and the columns that were there. And that's why there's
facing one another.
Facing one another.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you have to do it that way, but even to have put a landscaping piece into it or some kind of acknowledgement of that, but that hasn't happened. And so what's happened is the public has gotten very, very frustrated, and I'm frustrated because I want a new building.
Right.
I want a new building done under the time frame that they're trying to do. And I think we still have an opportunity to do it.
Do you think we're too far down the Bloom path, if you will, to bring that argument back or to bring it back a little bit? Or because I still understand there's a fight about the fields and all of this, and has the ship sailed?
I don't believe the ship has sailed.
Okay.
Because ultimately the voters are the one who are going to decide.
Right.
And we have had debt exclusions in the past where the leadership felt we were going in a direction and we were just going to do it no matter what, and then they failed. But when
what happens if it fails? Do they go back to the board or whatever they call it?
To the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority. The what's at risk with that is the funding that comes from them.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who are kind of afraid about that process. I believe that we are such a model for everything that we ever do to other communities. that the MSBA will want to partner with Lexington regardless.
Right.
But I
just want it to be something that people want to vote for.
Exactly.
Not that they have to vote for it because they're afraid they're going to lose the funding from the Mass School Building Authority.
You said it very well.
Yeah.
I support that position completely. And again, it can be done if we get started right after the election and really engage the public. Maybe we can come to a solution because the architects are there to do the project that we're interested in.
Good. Well, there are a couple other quick things I want to touch base on. We're winding down. We're getting to the end of our time. So, it goes so fast.
I know.
It really does.
I could talk all day.
But you were talking about, an affordable town for all. You had talked a little bit about, I want to mention, by the way, you had mentioned the firefighters endorsement, and I know that was important to you. So I wanted to bring that up. That's something you're very proud about?
Not only am I very proud about it, but one of the very first experiences, even before I was elected as a select board or before I had run for town meeting, I had been in the fire station and learned that the facility was in very terrible shape. There was a lot of sickness amongst the firefighters. And in particular, we had one female firefighter at the time, and her bathroom went right onto the floor of where the trucks were. Oh. And I said that was not respecting her privacy at all. So it was my mission to both deal with that and also the DPW facility. And I was proud that the first thing that I did as a member of the select board was to chair the Space Needs Building Assessment Committee, in which we went through.
I remember that, yep.
Yep, we went through and we put forward a long-term plan to renew all those buildings, and with the police station being done, that was the last one on that plan. And so they, with a unanimous vote, gave me their support, and I'm the only candidate they've endorsed in this race.
Excellent. Affordable for all. When you talk about affordable for all and here in Lexington, what does that mean? It sounds like a nice concept, but from your perspective, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's just like a family, right?
Yeah.
If you realize that you may not have all the funding you want for everything you want, the first thing you do is you look at your budget in detail, which is what I did when I got on the select board previously. And you say, what is a want, not a need? And what can we do to pare down the budget? The second thing you do is you say, we need to figure out how to grow our revenues. Maybe you take on a second or a third job. In the case of the town, you do economic development. And what we talked a little bit about the visitors-based economy that I helped grow, but one of the things I'm most proud of is that we tripled the revenue from the hotel and meals tax. And just this past week, the governor had indicated that she's going to give the towns more tools to do better with the hotel and meals tax. So that's something we want to get right on. And there are other ideas that I have for that, including an incubator where we could foster retail spaces, smaller, less expensive, so that they could grow and then move into our center and other business locations in Lexington. So there are ways that we can do that. And so, like, as my husband was an elementary school teacher and an elementary school principal, we are not people of lots of means. And I've spent a lot of my time being a public servant for this town.
Right.
So what it means to me is that people who find a way to buy into Lexington and are able to be here should not be forced to leave the town because it's too expensive to do all the services. And that's what we're looking at with these projects.
I see both my parents have passed, but I see their contemporaries struggling to hold on to their homes as they get older.
The seniors and working families are really struggling. And that's so hard. And we should make it as easy as we can.
Right. I'm going to end with this, engaging with the public. That was something you said was important to you. So I'm going to leave that, and then at the end, after you're finished, and you can maybe talk a little bit about, as kind of a last minute, you're talking to voters now here, why they should give you a vote and all of that, and then where people can find out more information, your websites and other things, where they can learn more about Dawn McKenna. So when you talk about engaging with the public, you're talking about interacting, so you have a better mindset, a better understanding of what's on the mind of the public here in Lexington. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I'm talking about that. And in particular, when residents elect representatives, whether it's the select board, the town meeting members, or any of the other elected positions. You were doing that because we've all said we're going to commit to spend the time to inform you, to learn from you. It shouldn't be hard for them to find out the information, or in the case of MBTA zoning, learn after the fact that we've done this major process. So my dad always used to say to people, and I've lost both my parents too, and they lived with me for the last 10 years, but he would say to me, if you go down to do a 5-minute errand, it's going to take you an hour. I love the people of Lexington. I will always talk. My husband and my children will tell you the same thing. If they can't find me, they know I'm talking somewhere to a resident. And I just really care about that, whether I'm in office or not in office. And so that's how you learn. And I learn from them what it is they want, but I also want to improve. We have a public information officer. I want to improve that role so that it's not just reaching out to people by email. I've talked about the fact that I had encouraged the school committee years ago to take their show on the road and go to each school, because parents will come to their kids' school.
Right.
Maybe that's something we as a select board should look at. Maybe we should be having meetings at the community center, which people are very familiar with, but just finding a way for us to bring the information to them rather than them having to dig it out.
Right, got it. All right, so people want to find out more about Dawn McKenna. Where are they going to do that?
Well, it's very, very simple. I have a website, which is just dawnmckenna.org. We also have social media, which you can find from there. I want to personally ask each and every one of you for your vote. I would be honored to serve you, and I promise that if I do serve you, I will bring all my knowledge and leadership skills and my proven track record to do even more for Lexington. And ultimately, this is all of our town, and I need to work for you. And I want to remind you to vote on Monday, March 3rd. And if you are so inclined to support me, please go onto my website, again, which is dawnmckenna.org, and support me and endorse me if you're willing to. And I look forward to serving you in a broader role than I've been able to do in the last few years.
Excellent. Dawn,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Jim, so much. And LexMedia. This is such a service. I will quickly end with one quick thing that you'll appreciate. When I first ran for Select Board, LexMedia was first getting started, and practically nobody watched it. Now, everywhere I go, they say, "Oh, I saw you on LexMedia."
Oh,
and
that's good.
so it's so important what you do, and I want to thank all the volunteers who make LexMedia happen, and the staff who
Well, we've
does
got a
as
great
well.
staff. You know, as you well know, you can see.
Yep.
They can't see out there, but this doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
So
Well,
anyway,
thank you.
But thank you. You're
Thanks
very
again,
kind.
Jim. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it, and I appreciate your service to this town as well.
Well, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next segment.